And keep in mind that even though the final answer is important, you get awarded plenty of partial points just by providing a coherent explanation with what you're saying. So make sure that everything is crystal clear and make sure that it's easier for the professor to give you partial points. That being said, I think I can start sharing the screen. So if you allow me just a second, we should be good to go. Okay, here we are. Can you guys see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay. Then just a second. All right. And shall be good right now. Yep.
Yeah.
I can see it. Perfect. I don't know who's talking, but thank you, mate. So
No problem.
moving on. Do you guys have your exercise book, the exercise book with you? So just that it's easier for reference. We're mostly gonna talk about exercises which you have already seen. So in case you have a specific exercise you'd like us to solve together, please just type it in the chat. Otherwise, we have a selection of exercises I think we can go through. Someone else was talking.
Yeah, I think the chat isn't enabled, at least not for me. It says that it's just for the members.
Okay, I think this is a technical issue. Carlotta,
okay,
Sofia,
thank you. Yeah, we're working now.
Okay, we're solving it. So, okay, let me just turn it off for the sake of saving some data. And here we go. So can you all see the screen now, or are we still having issues? Well, hoping it's all good, I think we can move on. So first of all, we're going to go through the true and false questions from chapter 1. So chapter 1, TF38. If you guys want to go to the book, I think it's one of the first pages. So the question is, Tina views hamburgers and Coke as perfect complements. So in this case, we have good X, which is cheeseburgers, and good Y, which is Coke. This is the start. Then we have the situation, and we know they are perfect complements. So this is crucial. Complements. Okay. Thus, should we react to a reduction in the price of hamburgers? So reduction in PX by increasing her total expenditure on Coke. So the logic relationship is if PX goes down, QY goes up. So this is the starting situation. In the exam, I highly recommend to highlight or underline all of the important facts. And I mean, in this case, I think it's pretty clear. When we reduce the price, in this case, what happens? We have an increase in the quantity of hamburgers consumed. So QX increases. When QX increases, of course, we know we're talking about perfect complements, as written here. Therefore, it makes sense to say that if QX increases, then also QY increases. And this is also coherent with our budget constraint, because if PX goes down, then we have more money to buy goods Y. Therefore, yeah, this question is indeed true. Is everything clear?
Yes.
Perfect. So moving on, we have question 43. we're only going to look at the last questions from the chapter, as they tend to be the recap questions, perhaps. If you want to revise any question in between, really feel free to ask. At the end of the day, this whole session is for you guys. So we were saying, question 43. Anthony demand for potatoes is X equals to 1,000 minus 50 px. Whenever we see this kind of equation, we already know it's all about computing something, which is slightly less reasoning and a little bit more analytical reasoning. Anthony buys 400 potatoes, so X equals 400 at a price of 12. Yeah, equals 12. The present equilibrium lies along the elastic portion of Anthony demand curve. So this statement we have to verify is that the equilibrium, so Px Q, or as we said in this case, just X. Both of these notations, like X or Qx, are exactly the same in case you see them during an exam. Lies along the elastic portion. Lies. So whenever we have a question like this, we have to think about elasticity. And of course, the formula for elasticity is always the same for normal goods. Hence, we just have dx over d p of x times p of x times x over x. Apologies.
Stefano,
Okay.
just a quick interruption. I just wanted to ask if someone can text on the chat on Teams, if you can use it, or if it's still locked or something.
Stefano, meanwhile, can I ask you this? Can you repeat the text of this exercise, please?
The text of this exercise, sure. At the current market price, Anthony buys 400 potatoes at the price of 10 units, 10 euros, we can say. The present equilibrium lies along the elastic portion of Anthony demand curve.
Okay, but this is the 43, or because
43, yeah.
At least in my
book.
book.
Pardon. I'm sorry. There's I didn't read an important part. Potatoes are now priced at 12. Hence, a 10% rise in the price of potatoes will increase Anthony total expenditure on potatoes.
Yeah, and I don't have the that data of x equals to 400.
Oh, x equal to 400. We get it just by plugging in the
yeah,
value.
Okay, yeah, okay.
In this case, if you put px equal to 12, you find yourself with 1,000 minus 50 times 12, which is 1,000 minus 600, which is 400. And this is the figure we end up having here. At this point, apology. Yeah, sorry.
To tell Sophia that I still can't use the chat. I don't know about the others.
Okay, thank you for the answer.
Okay. I mean, if you need to ask anything, just feel free to speak up and feel free to interrupt me if you need it. Okay, so we were saying, I apologize for skipping a part of the question. Hence, a 10% rise in the price of potatoes will increase Anthony total expenditure on potato. So let's suppose Px increases, we have total expenditure will also go up. Now, this is the statement we have to verify. Let me just find an appropriate color. Okay. At this point, we were saying we ought to calculate the elasticity. Whenever we have a change, just like this one, a change implies, well, derivatives, not just in microeconomics, but in most of the subjects. Therefore, it doesn't come as a surprise that we have to use the equation for the elasticity of the demand curve. In this specific case, once we plug in everything, we know that this whole part, this first part right here, is just equal to minus 50. Is it clear? Like whenever we have this particular statement, we know we can just find it as part of the equation itself. Moreover, you guys haven't done derivatives yet in math, so even though you may have to compute a derivative, it will be computed for you, at least in the first partial exam, which is, I mean, it's not a life changer because I think you can all compute those easy derivatives, but still it's nice because if you see one derivative, you know you have to do something with elasticity. Moving on, of course, Px is equal to 12 and x is equal to 400. So once we plug everything in, we have minus 50 times 12 over 400. We have minus 1.5. So what does this figure tell us? This is the figure for elasticity, of course, and it tells us that if prices increase, or in this case, yeah, if prices increase by 10%, then what's going to happen to, let's say, well, Px increases by 10%. The reaction is that the quantity, well, actually, yeah, quantity is going to decrease, we were saying x, by 15%. So in this specific case, we already know that an increase in price will result in, actually, where is it? Yeah, a decrease in the total expenditure. Because suppose they costed 12. 12 plus 1.2 is Px seconds, and then we have x seconds, which is 400 minus. We can also get this second figure by plugging in the new number inside of the equation, but we are here to explain how the process works. So we were saying 400 minus 15%. Just allow me to get my calculator real quick. That will come in handy for sure. Okay, minus 60 equals 340. And in this case, we will have 13.2 times 340. Well, actually, it's total expenditure for 488. Okay, but just in general, when you see that we lie along the elastic portion of the curve, it's clear that if quantity increases, then if price increases, then our quantity will decrease by a greater amount than what the price has increased. Hence, to cut the story short, we will have a decrease in total expenditure. This figure will be lower than just doing 12 times 400. Originally, we see that the total expenditure was 4,800. So total expenditure seconds, 4,488, and total expenditure, let's call it original, was 12 by 400, which is equal to 4,800. So let's really cut it short. You have two ways to solve this problem: with elasticity, this way, and by plugging in the numbers, which is the other way. I mean, if you want to go for the most points, I strongly suggest elasticity, because that's what professors are all about, but also the second explanation is perfectly fine. Maybe a slightly smaller check will make it. And in general, if we actually go back to the original question, a 10% rise in the price of potatoes will increase the total expenditure. This statement is false. So let me just recap it. Both of the explanations, like this one and this one, are fine, but the actual answer is that it's false, because in both cases we see how the total expenditure at the end is lower. Moving on, I think that's it for chapter 1. Moving on to the true or false for chapter 2. Here we go. We will start by something a little easier. So TF, question number 5. Alex is endowed with 24 hours a day. So let's say QX. No, actually, let me read through the whole thing and then we will discuss it together. Alex is endowed with 24 hours a day to be devoted to work and leisure. The figure shows Alex's best choice of leisure and food when the wage rate is W1 equal to 10 and when it falls to W2 equal to 5. So first of all, let's see. We will also draw the graph, of course. Leisure and then we have food C. W1 is equal to 10, while W2 is equal to 5. Both leisure and food are normal goods. When the wage rate is W1, Alex's optimal choice is the bundle E1, where N1 hours are spent on leisure. Actually, let me draw it so you guys can follow even better. We have, let's say 6, 12, 18, 24. This is the original situation. Oh, actually, this is the second situation, and the original situation is this one. So, of course, on the x-axis, you always have the leisure, and on the y-axis, you have the other unit that's being employed. So in this case, it's food. We now trace the line to find the bundles. We will call our first point here E1, and our second point here E2. When the going back to the question, when the wage rate is W1, Alex's optimal choice is bundle E1, where N1 hours are spent on leisure. Let's also draw the hours spent on leisure. When the wage rate is W2, Alex's optimal choice is bundle E2, which is, as we said before, this one, where N2 hours are spent on leisure. And let's also draw N2. Then the substitution effect due to the fall in Alex's wage rate offsets the income effect. So, first of all, do you guys remember what the substitution effect and income effect are? Well, let's hope so, because it's actually one of the most important things. You guys are 100% going to have a true or false question, which only revolves around this. So let's start by stating the obvious. Alex reacts to a cut in his salary, a cut by 50%, by reducing his consumption of leisure. So, of course, we have that N2 is less than N1. That being said, when the wage rate goes down, the opportunity cost of leisure time decreases. What does it mean? If you're earning $10 an hour, then what's the cost of leisure? $10 an hour. When you're only earning $5 an hour, then of course the opportunity cost of leisure is much lower. Therefore, let's try to make it interactive. Do you guys think this has to do with the income effect or the substitution effect? The fact that leisure is now cheaper. What do you think is going to affect?
Income effect?
Well, first of all, thank you for answering. But I think that in this scenario, when we talk about the opportunity cost of leisure, we're talking about the substitution effect, meaning that if everything else stayed the same, given that leisure is less expensive, now Alex will actually consume more leisure given the price cut. Which means that because of the substitution effect, so let's just say if we can take into account substitution effect as E leads to Alex consuming more leisure. But still, we know for a fact that Alex reacts to his change in salary by actually consuming less leisure. So in this case, we have to see that, it's clear that the income effect instead leads Alex to consume less leisure. We can see it from the graph. Is this passage clear to everybody, that we can see the final effect on the graph? Okay, we'll take it as a yes. So we know that thanks to substitution effect, the N2 is supposed to go up. But still, we know that N2 goes down. So we have to say that the income effect not only is equal to the substitution effect, but it's also stronger. So we'll just say it quickly right here. Given that the final N2 is lower than N1, we must say that the income effect is stronger than the substitution effect. And moreover, given that those forces act in different opposite directions, so substitution effects wants us to increase leisure. Income effect wants us to reduce leisure. We know that the IE offsets the SE. And wait, let's phrase it a little better. Hence, the income effect offsets the substitution effect. Given that we know this, we can say that 100% statement 5 is false. And I think we're done. Moving on, we have question number 24. Catherine has a regular preferences over the present consumption, C0. We don't even need to write it down. And future consumption, C1. Consumption at any point in time is priced €1. So we have that P0 is equal to P1, which is equal to €1. Calculate intertemporal marginal rate of substitution. So intertemporal MRS is equal to 1.1. And her initial at the initial endowment point. Then, if the interest rate is equal to 10, well, let's say this is part of the statement. If I is equal to 10%, then Catherine will certainly save at present. So, what do we know? First of all, we know that the individual has regular preferences, like those are normal goods, and there's nothing weird about the text. This is fundamental. When we talk about these little types of exercises, a single word is enough to change the whole solution. And also, oh gosh, this is not ideal. Let me charge it. So while we charge the Apple Pencil just a little bit, let's see if we can say anything in particular. So we can state the basic things about the intertemporal budget line. Do you guys remember how it's shaped? I cannot draw it right now, so we might as well. Intertemporal budget line. Okay. I particularly like this graph as we also have a few formulas. Oh no, never mind. So the important thing is that, of course, we're no longer looking at just, goods and their price, but we're also looking at time. And that's another introduction which is enough to change pretty much everything about what we know. At this point, yeah, we should be able to draw for a few more minutes. We were saying, whenever individual preferences over goods are regular, we know that the budget line and the indifference curve must be tangent to each other. What does it mean? They must have literally the same slope. Catherine intertemporal marginal rate of substitution is equal to 1.1 at the initial endowment point. And I'm literally reading up the solutions right now. Whenever preferences over goods are regular, the MRS decreases as we move top down along the indifference curve. So let's also draw the indifference curve. Do you think this line is coherent with the 1.1 MRS? I mean, we'll just say so. So yeah. The one key thing we have to note is that the MRS, as you guys know, changes along this curve. So as we move from top to bottom, MRS actually decreases. So let me change the color for this one. As we move in this direction, MRS decreases. By comparing the value of intertemporal MRS at the initial endowment point with the slope of the intertemporal budget line, which, as we all know, the slope of the intertemporal budget line is constant. Why can we say the budget line is constant? Because we're not given any data concerning it. Once you have the prices, the MRS, and the interest rate, none of those factors impact the intertemporal budget line itself. It just impacts what's the intersection point and eventually the behavior of our consumer, Catherine. So that being said, the slope of the intertemporal budget line is exactly equal to 1 plus I, which is equal to 1 plus 10% id est 1.1. And we know one thing, but let's call it slope. This slope of 1.1 is exactly equal to 1.1 given by the MR. And as we just said, when the two lines are parallel to each other, whenever the slope coincides, we can also state that the initial point is the best choice. So let's recap. Whenever we have a condition where the slope of the intertemporal budget line is equal to the slope of our consumer preferences, which is the intertemporal MRS, we can state that the initial endowment point is also the consumer best choice. So when the initial endowment point, let's write it down, initial endowment point is equal to, oh wait, just a second. Let's write it down. Apologies, guys, but I'm just trying to put it in the easiest way possible so we don't create any confusion. When the slope of the intertemporal budget line which is given by this tiny formula is equal to our consumers MRS. Of course, we're still talking about intertemporal MRS. The initial endowment point represents also the consumer best choice. And that's it. So what else do we have?
Can you go back to the last thing you wrote? Because okay, thanks.
Okay, if you need to take screenshots, don't worry, because we're actually going to send the PDF if you have any questions. So we actually have a question here. So true or false number 32. My chapter, additional topics concerning decision. Just a second, let me. That's chapter 2, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay.
What's the answer to it?
Oh, the answer to this specific question, you mean?
Yeah, 24.
Sorry. Let us go back. In this case, it is false, as we were saying before, because we end up in a situation where Catherine is not certainly saving at the present, but it's a compromise where the initial endowment correspond to consumer best choice. So you just need to look at the initial state, which is in the text of the exercise itself. It's again number 24. And then judging by the initial situation and knowing that the situation basically stays the same, you can tell whether the consumer will save or spend money at present time. In our case, Catherine will not certainly save. Moving on, we were asked for question 32 and 33. If you guys have any inquiries, please text Sofia Gritti directly in case you cannot use the chat. So now it's funny because my book is in Italian and I'm gonna have to translate it real time. You guys are about to have a few laughs. Let's go. Question number 32. Take the linear demand equation X equals 20 minus 2p, where X represents the quantity and P the price. This function is elastic whenever the price is greater than 5. Let me actually write the number of the question. So this is true or false number 32. X is equal to 20 minus 2p, and target price, we say, is equal to 5. What do we have to do in this case? Well, first of all, we know the equilibrium price, which is 5.
Wait, is it always chapter 2?
Yeah, still chapter 2. My bad.
No, I mean,
can you guys see? Sorry, you were saying?
In my book, it's not written like that.
Same for me.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. In this case, if you guys can just send me the question, because as I said, I'm using an Italian book. If you have any different question, please feel free to send it.
It should be like chapter 1 questions.
Oh, I see. I see. Oh mon Dieu. Didn't see this coming. So going on, we're it's at page 95. Let's see. Oh, this is a very nice question. Okay. Do you guys all have the question with you? This is going to be really fun to translate. If a consumer spends the same amount on complementary goods, the price elasticity for both the goods will always be greater than -1. So we have two goods, X, Y, complementary goods. So I'm also gonna go through the solutions. So let's see what would happen to the total expense if the price of one of the two goods changes and some of their demand curve is inelastic. So demand curve is of course inelastic whenever we have ED greater than -1. So just a second, guys, I'm reading through it. Okay, so I think the most useful tool we have is the tiny table we are provided with. I'll try my best to recreate it, because in this case, it's fundamental to understand why and how everything changes. In particular, we have to understand what are the consequences of a rise or a decrease in price in every case. So if Px goes up or if Px goes down. So we know that we're talking about normal goods. So demand for good X, of course, when we have normal goods and the price of X goes up, quantity will consequently go up. But we also know that the goods are complementary. Therefore, the demand for Y will go down. Oh, sorry, if price increases, of course, normal goods, then demand for X decreases. In this other case, if Px goes down, then demand for X will increase. And hence, also demand for Y would increase. At this point, what is the crucial thing that we should reason about, especially when considering elasticity? We should considering the expenditure in X for X and the total expenditure for Y. Of course, if the price of X increases and the demand decreases, but we're also supposing that we have inelastic demands. Inelastic demands means that if the price increases, of course, we know that demand will decrease. But in this case, it also tells us that the decrease in demand is going to be less than the increase in price. Therefore, we will have an increase in the total expenditure. This is why, let's say, Px goes up by, let's do it like this. Px goes up by 2 arrows, and demand of X goes down by 1 arrow. This is the, let's write it, case for inelastic demand. Keep in mind, here we have, of course, 2 things, and here only 1 thing. That being said, we can state that 100% the total expenditure for X will increase. But also, given that we already know that the demand for Y is lower, let's write it, dy is lower and Py stays the same, of course, the total expenditure for Y will decrease. Again, this is all under the assumption that demand is inelastic. Moving on to the second scenario, we still keep our initial assumption. The demand for X increases and the price diminishes. We can state this time that the total expenditure for X will go down. And as the expenditure for X goes down and the demand for Y increases while the price of Y increases, total expenditure for Y will actually increase. At this point, we can state for sure 2 things. The first one, that a change in the total expenditure for one good, so a change in the total expenditure for, let me pick a color, for X will result in a change in the opposite direction for the other good. And of course, we have that the price for the second good we're talking about is not impacted in any scenario. So for every scenario we have, Px changes, but Py stays constant. Here, given that our two expenditures, so let me actually draw a thicker line here. Let's set it apart. Given that in this case, the two forces, total expenditure for X and total expenditure for Y, always fight each other. They're always try to offset each other. It is possible that in all of those cases, the final effect on the total expenditure, which is another column we're going to draw here, stays constant. Therefore, we know that even though the demand for a single good may be inelastic, the price elasticity for both goods taken together can be always greater than 1, because we know that those forces offset each other. And given that we don't have exact numbers, it is safe to say that in a general case, yeah, the price elasticity for both goods will always end up being greater than -1. Unfortunately, this is quite a long exercise. I don't think anything like this can actually happen in the exam. Even if it does, chances are you guys can just skip it. How it works is that usually you have two fairly easy true and false questions, a couple, well, actually, a medium level exercise, and then two fairly hard exercises. You're always gonna skip one of those.
Stefano,
yeah?
I have a question, but in this case, when the elasticity must be greater than 1, then -1, can also it be 1 or strictly greater?
Strictly greater.
In this case, it's always strictly greater.
Okay, but I knew that if the elasticity was equals to -1, then the total expenditure is always equal.
Yeah, it's always, wait, hold on a sec.
But when is equal to 1? So maybe
when it's minus, when it's equal to -1,
equal to -1. So maybe, I don't know, the exercise maybe wanted, like, by saying greater, maybe it even considers even -1.
let me take a look at the exercise.
Not only strictly, but just equal or greater, maybe, I don't know.
So if a consumer spends the same amount of money on two complementary goods, you're right. If we also add as an assumption that the consumer, regardless of the changes in total expenditure, must spend the exact amount, exactly the same amount for both goods. So in this case, total expenditure for X must equal total expenditure for Y. Then we can also say that it should not be strictly greater, but also greater or equal to -1. Because in this case, as you say, with ET equals to -1, we have, I don't know, PX increases by 10% and QX increases by, QX diminishes by 10% itself. But yeah, under all of the assumptions of the exercise, you're right. Okay, so we had another question, which was 33. And I'm afraid I don't have the solution for this as it's only online. If a consumer spends the same amount of money in two substitute goods, in two goods which are substitutes, the price elasticity for both goods will always end up less than -1. I mean, just judging by the text, I will tend to say it's false, but I don't have the text with the solution with me, so I cannot elaborate. I cannot elaborate further. If you want, we can take a deeper look at the end. But for the moment, I can just say, I think we can just move on to the following questions. So, what else do we have? Just a second. Let me make sure that I have a few photos, but I'm not exactly sure from which chapter they are. So, right. Let's move on. I think this is chapter 3. So, moving on, true or false, 21. Beta is a company. This question, let me see if there's any reference to this. Okay, Beta is a company. It produces good Q using only labor and capital. Both the wage rate and the unitary cost of capital are equal to 5 euros. Hence, W is equal to R, which is equal to 5. Using 6 units of labor and 8 units of capital, Beta produces 18 units of good Q. So Q is equal to 18. L is equal to 8. Oh no, L is equal to 6. And K is equal to 8. Beta produces 18 units. In its marginal rate of technical substitution, MRTS, is equal to 4. Then, using an extra unit of labor and one less unit of capital, Beta could produce more output, keeping the spending on input unchanged. So, if we take a look at what we're doing, we realize that the current inputs used by Beta is not optimal because RTS equals to W over R, of course, which in our case is equal to 1. But actually, we know that the MRTS shall be equal to what? To 4. Given that 1 and 4 are different, we know that 1 unit of labor is as productive. First of all, we trace back to our first equation and we say, what does it mean? MRTS equals W over R. So if we plug in before into this equation, we find out that 4 is equal to Y over W over R. And at this point, we can also say that 4R is equal to W, which is exactly the same thing as saying that 1 unit of labor is just as productive as 4 units of capital. At this point, we know that the cost of the two inputs are the same. Therefore, does it make any sense for us to spend money on capital when labor is more useful? So we say more efficient. And this one right here is less efficient. The problem is asking us if we use 1 extra unit of labor, so plus 1 L and minus 1K, can we produce more output by keeping the cost unchanged? Well, of course, the cost is unchanged because we will spend more for like plus 5 euros for labor, and we will save 5 euros for capital. But at the same time, the productivity of labor, W, is equal to 4 times the productivity of capital. Hence, the final answer is yes, we can actually produce more revenue by substituting 1 unit of capital with 1 unit of labor. We just need to, for solving this exercise, we just need to take a look at the MRTS, see what's wrong with it. And in this case, it was enough to see the discrepancy between this and the data we were given, which is this. And once we know this, it was enough, to go through the whole formula, plug in the values, and realize what's going on, meaning that one type of input is definitely more useful than the other. So moving on, we have true or false 29. In the long run, firm alpha can always produce 1 unit of good Q by employing either 2 units of labor or 4 units of capital. This is very interesting, as whenever you see or in the formula, it's about to be very funny, as we are about to put together perfect substitutes and production theory. And then the input combinations A57 and B74 belong to the same isopont. So let's write it down. We know that Q can be produced by either 2 units of labor, or Q can be produced by 4 units of capital. Then the input combination A equals 57 and B equal to 7, 4 belong to the same isopont. Belonging to the same isopont means that the final output stays the same for all of the exercises. And then we also have a few more requests. Exercises 1, 3, 5, 27 from chapter 3. We will go over those as soon as possible. At this point, what can we say? We have to take a look into our data, and okay, perfect substitutes. 1 unit of labor in this case is as useful as 2 units of capital. We just need to take a look. You see, if we take a look here, for example, we plug in 2. Oh wait. Let's actually go through the whole process without plugging through numbers. Let's see the MRTS, which in this case is equal to delta K. So the change in K over the change in L. In this case, we have 4 over 2, which is just equal to 2. In the input, and then once we know that one of the resources is more efficient than the other, we see the changes in from A to B. So we know that L would increase by 2. And let's do this with a different color. And K goes down by 3. Plugging in with the utility, what do we know? We know that actually, given that we are only increasing 2 and decreasing by 3, and that our MRTS is equal to 2, those 2 points cannot be on the same isopont. Instead, here, as labor tends to be more productive than capital, what we're going to have is the increase in output in point B, let's say, L is equal to 2 times 2 delta. I always remember delta. While K, in this case, K is equal to 3. And it's saying, let's keep him actually. We can also plug in the numbers from here. So for 2, given this change, we know that the delta in final number is given by, here we go again, +8 and -6. In this case, the final efficiency given by the transformation from A to B is +2, the final delta. Therefore, in B, we are being more productive by 2 units. Hence, if B is more productive, the 2 points cannot be on the iso point. And iso point, of course, refers to the quantity. If we were to draw this in a graph, we would have our 2 iso points, 1 and 2. And we actually know that 5, 7 is a different iso point than, for example, 7, 4. And voila. Of course, this problem cannot be solved graphically, because if you don't have an idea of what the iso points are, now that we know this, we draw those 2 curves. But if we didn't, we could have also just said, oh, must be like this. And in this case, of course, the iPad doesn't help us, but I think you guys get the point. Moving on, we're also asked exercises 1, 3, 5, and 27. I'm gonna need the pictures for those exercises. So if you guys could just send them to me or to Sophia, that would be great. I think we lost a few people during the chat, during the call. So given that it's a few of us, feel free to send the questions directly or speak up if you prefer. Let me get the chat. Okay, if nobody says anything, I think we can just move on to the next exercise we have planned. So, yeah, our page. We also have true or false 28, which was part of the program. The technology of a perfectly competitive firm can be represented by the production function Q KL equal to square root of L times square root of K. Let me redraw it.
Again, what was the true or false that I wasn't listening?
Oh, my apologies. This is false.
No,
It's very.
Okay, no, I meant the true or false that we are doing right now. What is the number? Because I wasn't paying attention.
Number 28.
Okay, thanks.
You can't blame you for that. It's 8:15, so it's pretty late for everybody. In the short run, the firm is endowed with 4 units of capital, so K is constant and equal to 4. And the market interest rate, which is the unitary cost of capital, is R. Yeah, unitary cost R is equal to 10. While the wage rate, which is the unitary cost of labor, is W equal to 20. Then the short-run variable cost of the function firm is VC of Q equal 2 squared. Then we have variable cost of Q equal to Q squared. In this case, we must first of all solve for our equation. We must solve for L or Q doesn't really change. In this case, we know that K is fixed, so Q is equal to square root of L square root of 4, which is 2 square root of L. Therefore, to produce Q units of output, what do we need? Square L, 2 square L equals to Q. So L is equal to, where is it? Q squared over 2 squared, which is the same thing as Q squared over 4. In the short run, the total cost is given by, of course, the unitary cost of wage, which is 20. Wait, let me just write. Cost of wage times L plus cost of capital times capital. At this point, what do we have? We have 20 times, of course, Q to the power of 2 over 4 plus 10 by 4, where, of course, we have some fixed amounts, such as 10 by 4, and other amounts which are not fixed. In this case, we can just say 5 Q2 plus 40. This here is a fixed cost, and here we have the variable cost. The variable cost is this whole thing, including the 5, hence it is different from our initial statement of Q squared. Hence, we can just state that true or false 28 is false. And I think that's it. If you guys want to have some exercises, they're asking for exercise 1, 3, or 5. Does anybody have exercises with them? Pietro, any chance? Okay. If we don't have any exercises we can get, then I think I cannot see who wrote it in the chat, as Sophia just told me. Moving on, we can actually move on to the next chapter. So, true or false, number 3 from chapter 4. GNN is a perfectly competitive firm. At present, it's producing 40 bikes. The price of a bike, so QB is equal to 40. Price of P is equal to 70 euros per bike. In the short run, marginal cost, MC of QB, is equal to 2 QB. Thus, the firm may increase its profit by producing more units of output. Let us see how it works. So, it's a fairly simple exercise. We know that the marginal cost is equal to 2 times QB. It is sufficient to plug in the numbers that we have to find out that MC of 40 is equal to 2 times 40, which is equal to 80. Of course, in this case, we have that 80 is greater than 70, which is the price we're selling the bikes for. Hence, if we produce more, we're not only going to incur more losses, but we also found out that we are already incurring a loss whenever we produce a unit. Therefore, it actually makes more sense for us to reduce how many bikes we are producing. For example, if we were to produce QB equal to 35, at least we will have marginal cost, which is constant, but we will have a cost for producing 35 bikes, which is equal to 2 times 35 which is equal to 70, which is exactly what we're selling the bikes for. In this case, we will be perfectly profitable, but in general, no. Increasing profits will not increase just by increasing the production. And what else do we have? I think that's it. The book gives us quite a lengthy solution, which I think can be avoided. At the end of the day, keep in mind that a couple of lines, well, maybe not a couple of lines, but 2 to 3 lines can be enough to justify a question elementary like this one, an elementary question just like this one. Then we go on to a few different exercises, but if you guys have any questions, I think that at this point, we can also skip what we prepared and think about any questions you may have. At the end of the day, it's just the 10 of us. So yeah, if you're still here, feel free to ask any questions you may have. Guys, feel free to tell me if it makes sense for us to go forward with the exercises, if there's anything you'd like to review. Otherwise, Sarah, I don't know about you, but I think we can actually call it a day.
Stefano, would you mind solving a couple of the exercises of chapter 3, like 1, 3, or 5 of the true false?
Unfortunately, from the true false, yeah, sure. I just need the actual exercises because as of right now, I don't have my book. Like I only have the Italian version. Hoping that they are the same, I think we can do it. Otherwise, just a second. So, do you remember which page they are? Otherwise, I'm just looking into it.
For me, it's 159. But if you have your mobile, I can send you photos.
Oh, don't worry. I should have them with me. So, chapter 3, just to make sure. Okay, no, this is way too much Italian for me. If you want, I can just text my number in the chat, and you can tell me. You can send me the various things. Okay, plus.
Photos in a second.
Can you see my number, or I'm not sure on which chat I sent it?
I think I've sent you the photos anyways.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Here it is. So suppose that labor is the only input in a firm production process. The marginal product of labor rises as more labor is used, thus marginal cost increases when production rises. So is it okay if wait, actually, let me write down true or false 3. Labor is the only input. Marginal product of labor rises as more labor is used. Marginal cost increases when production rises. Why is it false? Well, first of all, it's false. But why is it? We know that the marginal production rises. Therefore, it becomes better for the company to produce more units, as we said. Wait, let me actually use some help from the iPads. the business will need smaller and smaller amount of workers to produce one more unit of output. So for example, if we need 4 workers to produce the first unit of output, to produce the third unit of output, we may only need 2 extra workers. Does it make sense? Like we're gonna need 4 in total, 4 workers for the first unit, 3 workers for the second unit. So in total, 3, 4, 3, 2, 4, 7, 9 workers. In this case, knowing that labor is the only input, and that, of course, we need less and less people as we move on. Less and less additional workers, let's call them. We know that the marginal cost of production will be decreasing instead. Does it make sense to you?
Yes, it does.
Perfect. So whenever you have those questions, if you don't want to get too theoretical, always make small examples like this one, where you just take into account 1, 2, or 3 units of goods for a set amount of workers. Those explanations are also accepted. Of course, keep in mind that you're going to have to explain the whole reasoning behind it. In this case, we're talking, so it's kind of a different thing, but in the actual exam, if you provide a decent explanation, that's more than enough. At this point, moving on, let me see the other question you sent. True or false 5? If the technology of a firm exhibits constant marginal return to labor, the firm can double its level of output by doubling the amount of labor. And in this case, it's true. It's pretty straightforward. So let me explain it. True or false 5? Saying that the marginal returns to labor is constant is the same thing as saying the marginal productivity of labor is constant. And if the marginal productivity of labor is constant, what does it mean? Well, to produce Q, let me change the pen. To produce Q equal to 4, you're going to need like 8 workers. To produce Q equal to 8, you're going to need, unsurprisingly, 16 workers. As of course, as we were saying, the efficiency is constant. So we can say here, always 2 units of labor for 1 unit of Q. In this case, what can we say? Yeah, it's possible to double the production level just by doubling the amount of effort, the amount of workers we are putting on the job. That's it. The only perhaps complicated thing about this question is the use of the synonym constant marginal returns to labor instead of efficiency, instead of labor productivity, perhaps. And yeah, last one, true or false 27. The figure on the right, oh, this is going to be very fun to draw. True or false 27. On the right shows the production function for a firm. Let me see. Oh, here it is. For a firm beta in which it's run. Then the marginal product of labor always slopes up. Well, let me first complete the graph. Here goes L and here goes Q. it says the marginal product of labor always slopes up. Of course, this is not the case. Why? We need to look not just at the rate of change at the first derivative of the function, but we also have to look at the convexity of the function. So the function itself is, let's say, convex up until this point. So for this whole part, it's convex. But then starting from the second part, so let's see if we can actually kind of draw it. Starting from the second part right here, it actually becomes concave. And keep in mind that the productivity of labor, in this case, let me go back to the question. Yeah, the marginal product of labor depends on the concavity of the curve, not on the slope. Therefore, if let's say here it's convex, so MPL increasing, but here it's concave, so MPL is decreasing. And that's just it. You just need to see if the function changes concavity. In this case, it does, in this precise point. And once you know that it's changing concavity, then it's sufficient to remember the theory. Unfortunately, this is only something you can learn by heart. You know that the marginal product of labor doesn't always slope up, but actually it slopes down starting from, let's call it L star onwards. Okay, and so if we don't have any...
So by sloping,
sorry, you were saying?
Yeah, so by sloping up, you're not just saying that it's positive, but that is increasing.
When we say sloping up, we mean the rate of change of the labor. And here in the graph, we don't have the rate of change of the labor. We just have the quantity and the labor itself. So we need to take not just the first derivative, but the second derivative of this function. When you look at the first derivative, you look for stationary points. When you look at the second derivative, you're looking for points where the function changes concavity. And in this case, when the question has to deal with, where is it? Here it is. The slope of the marginal product of labor, the slope is the derivative. The marginal product of labor is a derivative itself. So we have the derivative of this graph, which we can call f of x. Therefore, yeah, basically you must pay attention to the terms that are being used. MPL is a derivative of the labor function. The labor function. And then you have the slope of the MPL is a derivative of the MPL. In this case, you have two derivatives, and yeah, just by using this mathematical explanation is sufficient to say, okay, if here it changes its concavity, then we know that if we have a concave portion, just like this one, it's not always upward sloping. It's actually downward sloping, starting from here. And if we don't have any more questions,
no,
I think...
actually, like just the derivative of just a function is sloping, is not always upward sloping. Just the derivative of just a function. Like.
Apologies, I think I couldn't hear you very well.
Yeah, I made a mistake, I think. So no, yeah, everything's clear. I made a mistake.
Okay, do you guys all understand what's going on? Because, I mean, we can go over it again if you prefer. The whole point is that we're not just looking at the MPL itself, but we're looking at the slope of the MPL. That's what changes everything. So the MPL is always positive, of course, but the slope of the MPL, it doesn't always go up. Let me see if we can, for example, plug it into, well, if I had the function, like the actual function instead of just f of x, we could have just plugged it into GeoGebra or some other graphic calculator. But in this case, I'm sorry, but you guys are just gonna have to trust me. So yeah, I think that's it. So Pietro,
Okay, guys,
or
if you don't have any questions, I think we can end the call here.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a pleasure. It's been
Grazie
a
mille.
beautiful hour and a half. Oh, è stato un piacere.
Bye bye.
Siamo tutti italiani, no? Dovremmo.
Boh.
Sì, sì.
No.
Sì, tutti italiani.
Perfetto.
Vabbè.
Oh, fantastico. Raga,
Comunque
dovrebbero
la
rendere illegali.
registrazione verrà caricata su YouTube, penso. Quindi in
Sì,
caso
sì.
la trovate lì.
Magari, esatto, la tagliamo un paio di minuti prima di adesso, tanto...
No, vabbè. E niente, a posto. Penso che possiamo
È
finirla
stato un
qua.
piacere.
Grazie mille a tutti
Se avete
voi.
ancora domande il giorno prima dell'esame, qualsiasi cosa, scrivetemi e vediamo di ragionarci insieme. A questo punto, se avete già cenato, buono studio, se no, buona cena.
Grazie
Buona
mille.
serata.
Vabbè.
Ciao a tutti,
Ciao,
dai.
grazie.
Ciao.
Ciao, ciao, ciao. Caro, penso che puoi fermare la registrazione. Caro?
Arrivo. Sì, il problema è che se guardi l'ha fatta un altro ragazzo. Quindi ora speriamo.
Edoardo Ghedini.
Sì, non so chi sia. E comunque dovrebbe comparire nei file della chat.
Perché
E
qualcuno sta registrando queste chiamate e non siamo noi?
non lo so, cioè guarda, io veramente. Ma infatti ero convinta di essere io perché avevo fatto registra e poi guardo a caso, vado su e vedo Edoardo Chini. Cioè, ottimo.
No, beh, ciao Edoardo, grazie mille per averla registrata. So
ma
che
non
ti
penso-
farai... No, tanto se arriva pure lui, l'unica cosa che possiamo fare è uscire tutti dal meeting. E
penso
non
di sì,
saprei...
infatti stavo aspettando per vedere qualcosa, ma adesso usciamo e vediamo se si carica.
Adesso come lo rintracciamo questo qui? Ciao Edo, scusa il disturbo, non è che riusciresti a staccare...
Edoardo Ghidini si chiama.
Si chiama Edoardo Ghedini. Mhm.
Ah, buono.
Oh mon Dieu. Dai,
Ciao Ste.
anche questa l'abbiamo fatta. Ciao caro, stammi bene.
Ciao. Anche tu.